Welcome back to That Rugby podcast, hosted by the Rugby Booth. Your boy Luke, boy Hughesy, back. Look, you've got to win. A win.
Yep.
That's all.
Yep.
That's what we wanted. We wanted to win.
Should have been 2. Could have been 3. Could have been 3. It's yeah. Look, TMO decided this series, which at the end of the day means it was a close series, right? So all of those wankers over in England saying, "Oh, why do we even tour Australia? Why do we even tour?" This is why, because you're not that good, all right? Why would you not want to tour Australia? It's the only place you can win a tour. Look, in all seriousness, though, great game. What I've liked is that the Wallabies have improved every single game, which for the Wallabies as a whole, outside of this tour, is the biggest thing for them, right? And you're really seeing the value of Joe Schmidt as a coach in how he has continued to improve this team. I think game 2 and game 3, despite the lack of health, we're starting to see his vision of what this team can do. One thing that really impressed me was they showed in the pre-match or during the match during the Lightning break, there was a stat which was penalties conceded by the Wallabies. And in the 2 years that Schmidt has been there, it has dramatically reduced down to from double digits to 7 penalties a game, which I think you've said before on this podcast is you'll win a game in rugby if you commit less than 10 penalties a game. So really, really good there. What I also really liked, after a lot of refereeing controversy, is the referee in this game, the Georgian, forgive me if I butcher this last name, Nika Amashukeli, right? There was obviously a lot of tension and feeling in this one, right? But was very clear, very direct with the captains, but sort of let it play out a little bit, even when I will say the Lions started some shit, like when I think it was Ryan got knocked out and then Owen Farrell took exception to how Skelton was sheltering his body and got involved, even though it didn't fucking involve him whatsoever. Classic Owen Farrell things, and he and Nick White got into it a bit. Even though he'd already warned both teams, given the gravity of the situation with the player knocked out, the referee sort of just cooled everyone down, recognized it was, when your teammate's injured or when a player's injured like that, everyone's blood is up, and just let it fizzle out and spoke to the captains. I think he did a really good job. I liked how when the TMO tried to get involved for a nonsense thing with Nick White bumping into someone trying to go after a ball, he just dismissed it. I think he refereed a really good game. And I think, to be fair, in the previous game, the Italian referee, Piardi, also refereed a good game. It was again the TMO that got things wrong. And even in the first game, Ben O'Keefe had one howler call, and then the other 2 were TMO decisions. So I think overall, the refereeing has been decent in this series. It could be better. I think, calling offsides could be better. The Lions coming from the side of the ruck could be better. But speaking of the TMO, we have to talk about the non-call on Tom Liner, where Sheehan comes in low, elbow straight to the head. Right now,
can I start on this? And
go for it.
The only reason I want to start is so obviously in London we have the same coverage as you, so it's quite clear that like Sky Sports is using Stan's coverage, but we have different commentators. And what was hilarious? Like I said to my partner at the time, I said, they have replayed this Tom Liner incident about 7 times. Not once was it mentioned in the commentary box for the British and Irish Lions, like from Dan Bigger and all that. It was like, it is quite clear that the Wallabies commentators or the Australian side commentators are talking about
this as they keep showing it.
It was shown and shown and shown, and there was not a mention of it. And I was just like... Yeah. There's quite clearly something going on here, and there's a disconnect there. But I'll let you take away your thoughts on the actual incident.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is the second week in a row that a player has come into a ruck after an Australian player hit him in the head and not been penalised for it. And where the Northern Hemisphere is supposedly the safer region of rugby, where they really take head knocks seriously, and they think us down here in the Southern Hemisphere are rough and ready. The fact there was no call on that, on both of those is pretty shocking to me. But there was a lot of leniency, I think. I think there was a clear directive given to the TMOs in this series of really let the game play and don't make too many big calls, which, it's hard because we do like to see more of the gameplay, not the TMO get involved too much. But for flagrant incidents like that, that's what the TMO is designed for, is for those incidents to get involved. The fact that the TMO tried to review the Nick White one and not that one on Liner, for me, is just it's a joke, right? It really needs to look into the standards. I think even in the previous week, Nigel Owens had come out and said something like, players and coaches get evaluated on their performance, why not referees as well? And I think that's true. I think referees and TMOs do need to be evaluated on performance. I mentioned it last week. And the fact I'm even saying this once we've won as well, I think shows the depth of feeling on this one, that it's coming from a place of we need to fix this, because it can really, that we've lost our playmaker, right? We've lost our first string 10 for the entire game. If this was the second test, we would have lost him for the third test as well, the same way we lost Tizano, right? And the fact there was no consequence at all for the British Irish, not even a penalty, is, I think, really, really bad. With this one, it was even more egregious than the one on Tizano. The one on Tizano, there is debate. As much as we might be on different sides, or I might be on the different sides to British and Irish Lions, about the timing of it, how soon Tizano gets in before Morgan, if they're calling it simultaneous or not. This one, Liner is sitting on the ruck. He's in the ruck. There's no getting there at the same time. He's as low as he can be there. And it's what I said last week. At some point, you've lost the ruck. When another player's in that good of a position, if the only way you can get into the ruck is by hitting them in the head, you've lost the ruck, right? You can't do anything there, and that should be penalized. If you do try and do that, or you have to accept that you've lost the ruck. So it's really bad for the game, not just in terms of refereeing and outcomes of the game, but outcomes of player health and safety as well, right? When we're allowing this to happen, and I don't think Sheehan's a dirty player. In fact, we both quite admiring of Sheehan. As you said, I think he's probably the best hooker in the world right now, and took over as captain when Itoje and Byrne went off, was really, really great. I think overall, and I had to come back on as well when the Lions got a card. So, I think he's a great player, but I think that's just, he's been allowed to get away with it, so he's going to keep doing it, And again, you're trying to win these games, right? So it's not even like a fault of the player, even. It's a fault of refereeing, and more specifically the TMO, who has clearly got the camera angle of it, since we've seen the replays of it, but hasn't pulled it up.
Yeah, and he's been cited since, and it's interesting. I agree with everything you're saying. I don't think he's done that on purpose. Again, he's counter-rucking to Liners protecting the ball, and it's one of those situations where I go, we probably haven't seen this that often where a head contact's made this way around, because normally it's when you're Jack Morgan type incident, when you actually have the ball and you're going for it. But obviously a hooker, if you see a 10 over the ball, that's a target to go and try and clean that player out, and he's made head contact. And I go, I agree with you, it's a hard one. I'm getting more and more to the point where I would like to see, unless the ref sends it up to the TMO doesn't get involved at all. Sight things. So I like, as you've kind of said, the game to flow. If it's completely, utterly dirty, so foul play that, like a punch or an eye gouge or something like that, yes, get involved. But for that, it's a bang bang play. Refs haven't seen it. They don't send it up to the TMO. That gets cited and then sent away. And again, he misses games because of it, and he's got to learn and get, chuck a fine in there, whatever. You've got to learn. There's got to be some teaching to it. I totally agree. Yeah. But I also like what you kind of said. I think fans have asked enough, and noticing it here that we don't want the TMO involved when they don't need to be. And we saw the Nick White, and then even with the knock on late in the game, I just said, why are we reviewing this shit? It does not need to be reviewed. It's not dangerous play. It's not even we're just going to give away a penalty just because. I just sat there and I was like, to me, I see what they've done and I get it. I like that he's been cited. The whole incident is obviously it meets foul play threshold. So it's a tough one.
I think where a player has to go off because of a head injury, that should be automatically reviewed by the TMO, and TMO should get involved in that instance. I think I agree with you though in things like the Nick White incident or other sort of small incidents that the TMO shouldn't get involved unless the referee directs them or there's a captain's challenge type situation. But if there's head contact and it's not really been noticed and it hasn't caused an injury, the referee hasn't noticed it, it's a tough one because we're about player safety and we want to make sure it's right. But I think your solution is good. They get, NRL style, put on report, match review committee looks at it from there. Because, there are some instances in the game where there's some head contact, but it's so minor, but then it ends up being a card because they come down so hard on it. But then you've got these other incidents where a player gets, and the player's not even injured from it. You get these other incidents where a player's knocked out and nothing at all happens. It's if you're going to pull game up for those minor incidents and you're not going to do it for this major one, then it needs to be a different solution.
Yeah. 4 head injuries in total in that game. Obviously, that one, they're one that's been heightened. But you think Tommy Freeman went off, Itoje went off with a head injury, and then James Ryan, obviously, which was everything was legal there. But again, these things happen in rugby as well. Like as much as we want player safety, those it seems like I haven't seen anything like Tommy Freeman or Itoje. Yeah. So it's these things happen. So.
Let's talk about the game itself, though. And look, let's start with the man in the spotlight, Nick White. I've been very vocal about my non-fandom of Nick White. This is one of the best games I've seen him play in a while, right? What I think was really important is he let Harry Wilson captain and didn't chat too much to the ref, which has been Nick White's downfall in the past. He was in the Lions' face. He got under their skin, right? This is Faf de Klerk level shithousery from a 9 at its best, right? His kicker game was perfect for the conditions. You know, for everyone saying, "Oh, is this a sentimental pick?" I think Joe Schmidt proved, and when he came out and said, "I'm not a sentimentalist," Nick White gives us the best chance here with Jake Gordon injured. I think he proved him absolutely right. I think he had an absolutely fantastic game from the 9 position. But when we're looking at impact players in this game, it is hard to go by the biggest man on the field, Will Skelton, right? My favorite thing that happened in this game, right, was there was a scuffle, right? And Nick White got in Sheehan's face over something. And then another Lions player went to push Nick White. And Will Skelton just comes flying in from the side and just like pushes 2 Lions players away in their bodyguard style. That's what you need to do, right? That's what was missing from game 1 is that aggression. The Wallabies at game 1 were not aggressive. Game 2 and game 3, no surprise when Skelton's in there, they all got aggressive, right? And his remarks at halftime, we don't take any itch. That's going to be an iconic line, I think, for the Wallabies for years to come. And that's the attitude they need to play with, right? Just what a force during this game. Just absolute wrecking ball, physical presence, right? Just really up the aggression, especially in the absence of Valentini. Now, Valentini is not as vocal as Skelton. Valentini is like a quiet killer who just hits hard, right? He's very hard to bring down. But Skelton brings the attitude as well. And I think that's why I would even put him as a more important player than Valentini, right? Because Valentini is superb on an individual level and it helps the teammates directly around him. But Skelton helps the whole team with that aggression level. And I think Dylan Peach is the same way. Dylan Peach has pretty much put a lock on that wing jersey for himself with the physicality he played with, the excellent ability to score, coverage. Like, he was fantastic this game. And he and Jorgensen, man, what a win combo there. I mean, it was what I've been calling for from the start, right? You saw how Peach played against the Lions in that first game of the Western Force, right? He was one of the standout players in that game, always aggressive, always hitting hard, always chasing everything. That's what the Wallabies needed, right? And as skillful as Potter is, skill only takes you so far. You need aggression as well. And that's what the Wallabies have needed, and I think they've needed for a while, is some of this raw dog aggression, which you've gotten from Skelton, you've got it from Valentini, you got it from Peach. I think even Suali'i is bringing some of it as well. He just needs to learn to tackle a bit better. But, you know, overall, great game. Tom Hooper as well. Man, talking about big shoes to fill, filling in for Bobby V, filled in wonderfully. Had a great game, really improved, right, from, you know, the World Cup 2 years ago where he was being hailed as the next thing and he had a disappointing campaign, sort of had to take a bit of a backseat and has really earned his way back up the ranks. I think absolutely fantastic. But in terms of earning their spots back in redemption, Taniela Tupou, man, we're in a game where the British and Irish Lions scrum every single time was angling in on him illegally, and they got pulled up on it this game, but he stood firm in the face of that and just Porter he is perpendicular to the scrum most of the time, right? And thankfully the referee pulled him up on it because he's been doing it for the entire series now. But Tupou, they're just fucking locking him out, was amazing. And man, that little inside ball from Skelton where Tupou got it in space, that was like, you know, going back to that game against the Springboks where he had the magical assist to Korobete, and if he just hadn't switched hands with the ball, like I could see what he was trying to switch hands to hold off. I think it was Kinghorn or Freeman, one of the two wingers. He's like, man, Tupou, you don't need to do that. But I can see why he's trying to do it, because he's like, I'm going to hold off with one hand and I can score with the other one, because I guarantee you if that winger tried to tackle him, Tupou would have carried him the rest of the way to the line. He was very firmly thinking about scoring there. I could see what he's trying to do, and I don't fault him for it, right? You know, you see a skinny winger coming at you and you're a prop like Taniela Tupou in full flight, you think I'm scoring here. Like, he might catch me, but he's not stopping me, you know? But yeah, a really, really good game for him. And look, overall, I think with you know, Hooper going overseas next year, with Tupou going overseas next year, with Skelton being overseas, when the number of different players going overseas really shows you why the Giddo law needs to go. Even though it's not officially a policy anymore, Quade Cooper actually had a really great column on it. And one of the parts that stood out to me the most, which I think is such a good part about it, is he said, you've got this great talent. We've seen in South Africa how it works. Let them go overseas and get paid a lot, and somebody else is footing the bill then. So then you can pay for your other players here back at home, right? And I think that's especially true now that we've condensed down to 4 Super Rugby teams, right? It's not as necessary to retain all of the talent here in Australia because we only have 4 Super Rugby squads, and we saw this year how competitive that made them, right? They were able to elevate their level of play. I think you've got now that you've only got 4 teams rosters to fill, you don't need the Giddo law. We can bring more players, let more players go overseas, and not have to use the you won't get picked for the Wallabies line to try and get them to stay. So yeah, go overseas, play over there, get better, and then come back and play here for your country. Because Skelton showed why it works. Quade Cooper, when he was overseas and was recalled, has shown why it works. And now Taniela Tupu's going to go over there. I think he's going to improve beyond sight over in France. And it'd be real benefit for the Wallabies to have him back. I know from your perspective, from a New Zealand's perspective, watching the game, what did you think of the Wallabies?
Yeah, I think they played such smart footy, if you know what I mean. Like, those conditions were horrendous. And as soon as they got into the 22, they just said, we're going to hold on to this ball and make you tackle us for as long as we can. And then you'll do something stupid, get a penalty, and then we'll try and go to the backs. I think they played really smart. However, the skill level of the Wallabies has quite clearly also improved under Joe Schmidt. Like,
the handling,
can see the handling especially. Like, I think it was Jorgensen who had like a tap on, and it's like
over the head. Yeah,
in those conditions, the ability to do it, and B, the belief to do it, just shows where they're at. And again, it doesn't have to come
All Blacks-esque. That's something that we're so used to seeing from the opposing sideline. So. Watch the All Blacks do against us. Sitting down watching the game with my dad, and it's like, no surprise that a New Zealand coach has brought this into the Wallabies. And I said, I reckon they've got to have, like in the NFL, they have the catching, and even cricket, they have the like bowling machines. I reckon they've got something like that for the Wallabies, where they're just firing rugby balls at them to get their hands used to it, which is what the Wallabies needed. Because years gone by, in this decade alone, the amount of games I've seen go down the toilet because of a handling error, I need 5 sets of hands to count them. Like, it was very good to see.
Yeah, 100%. So, like, that, again, I thought was incredibly smart the way they played it. Like, I remember watching game 1 and just being like, same old Wallabies. Again, game 2, I was like, fuck. Little tingle in the nuts. I was like, something's up here. Like that try from Tom Wright where they saw a lead broke, and I'm like, something's up here. Obviously lost the game, and again, I sit there and I go, typical Wallabies. I'm not surprised, blow it still. And then this third game, I was like, going into it, I was like, I want the Wallabies to win, but again, I don't you've just had heartbreak. I think if you were going to take a game, it was in Melbourne. You've got this rain. I went, this is, the best of the best of 4 nations. Realistically, you guys are, 5th, 6th in the world. I was like, maybe my hope's just too much. I think I just hoped too much. And then you came out and put on that performance. So I went, look, to me, you will get yourself up for a British and Irish Lions series. There's no doubt about it. We look at what happened to Argentina. They beat the British and Irish Lions, lost 2 games to England. And I go, what actually happens now is probably now more important.
Yes.
After the fact that you've lost the series, but you're going into a rugby championship, your first 2 games are against South Africa. It's like, how do you handle that? And how do you perform in those games? To me, that's where the actual story of this tour is going to lie.
The attitude of Skelton, he needs to be in this rugby championship, and whatever attitude he's bringing needs to be adopted by the rest of the team as well, right? I know there's some discussions about his commitments to French rugby. I don't know, but he needs to be in this rugby championship. Australian rugby is serious about this rugby championship. They need Skelton to be in here. I think Skelton wants to play in it because you can see what the jersey means to him, and that's the attitude. The shot of Skelton holding 2 British and Irish Lions players like this. Now 2 test matches in a row where he did it to Atoje in the second test, and then he did it to 2 more players in this test. I think it was Ryan and Porter. It's up there with the Eben Etzebeth holding on to Alatoa, right? Images for iconic images of rugby, and that's showed the South African attitude in that game. This shows, I think, the attitude Australia needs to have in these games to be competitive with South Africa, to be competitive with New Zealand, to be competitive with Argentina, because we know how good Argentina is now. I think the Wallabies have been unfortunate in this series with injury and probably not enough lead-up games, right, as a team together, as a whole squad together. Missing Valentini and Skelton in the first test, right, was obviously not ideal. Then in the second test, losing Potter and forcing McDermott to play on the wing. Valentini and Skelton still not fully healthy and not being able to play a full game. Alatoa getting injured in that game, so forced the front row shift early. And then in the third game, not having Valentini at all, and then Liner getting his head chopped off, right? I think injuries have played a part in this, but obviously, and British and Irish Lions have got 4 nations worth of depth to call upon, right? Australia, we just got 1. And even in Australia, it's a shallow pool because of AFL and NRL, as it's been going around the media. So, yeah, look, what we need to do now, I agree 100%. That was my question after this game is, okay, there's been so much emotion in this tour. Can we keep that up for the Rugby Championship? And that's going to be not only Joe Schmidt's job, but that's going to be the job of the players and the leaders, particularly Harry Wilson. Like, this is where a captain really shows his worth, is not even just on the field, which we've seen him be an excellent captain on the field, the way he's handled things, the way he spoke to the referees, handled disputes and things like that, but also now this time in between games, right? Harry Wilson is now locked in as the Wallabies captain. I think there's no debate on that. All the media speculation about Jake Gordon, this, that, and the other. I think Harry Wilson, as much as one can own a jersey and a position in rugby, he owns that, right? Now, between the end of this game and the first game against South Africa, he needs to keep his players motivated and going. And I think this win will do that. I think this win will go a long way to that. I think the likes of Dylan Peach is amazing for that. I think even who I was super impressed with was Jeremy Williams, right? He only had 20 minutes of game time, and you could see he'd heard the criticism, right? I mean, I hear was quite scathing of him in that game. Stole 2 lineouts, got a penalty, tackled very, very hard, just really showed a lot of spirit and nastiness that we hadn't seen from him in the first 2 tests, right? And again, I think that comes down to having people like Skelton around and playing and leading by example, right? So now going into the Rugby Championship, it's the responsibility of Wilson and the other leaders in that locker room, the senior players, to keep that emotion and motivation going. And it's going to be hard because the British and Irish Lions are dicks, and they made dicks themselves. Their media made dicks of them, made them into a hated opponent, right? And as much as we don't get along with South Africa and you guys in New Zealand, it's not that same level of hatred, right? At least it flares up into that. It definitely can flare up into that. The British media really fanned the flames on this one and probably did their team no service by doing it. From the start of saying, "Oh, it's going to be a 3-0 sweep, easy. Why are we even touring Australia?" Having dickheads like Pollock saying, "Oh yeah, 3-0 sweeps is on the cards for us. That's what we're, that's definitely what we're doing." And things like bringing Owen Farrell into the squad. All of that nonsense, I think, really fanned the flames for Australia, which is really good. And I'll talk more about the UK media in a second. But look, it's now, as we said, that's the challenge for the Wallabies, is keeping that momentum going into a series. Now, the fact that they're going up against South Africa first is really challenging, and going to South Africa to do it is really challenging because no tougher environment to play in, no tougher opponent to play against than the number 1 ranked team in the world on home soil, and no quicker way to kill momentum than to have a couple of devastating losses in that game. Now, look, even if the Wallabies lose those games, if they keep it close, if we just don't have repeats of what we had under Eddie Jones, then we come out looking pretty good there. Getting a bonus point in those games is pretty good. So, when we start looking towards the Rugby Championship, that's what I'm looking for from the Wallabies, right? Our next goal is the 2027 World Cup and building towards that, right? So that's what we need. That's the aim now. Is we've seen the improvement under Schmidt from the first game under him to now, leaps and bounds. Even within this Lions series, from the game against Fiji to now, leaps and bounds, right? I think the squad positions now, there's a lot of speculation in that Fiji game and in the first Lions tour. Who's playing where? Right, who's starting? Where's Suaalii going to play? Who are the wingers? What's the halves combo going to be? What's the forward pack going to be? What's the front row combination? I think we've got that settled now. Right, so if I'm going through now, and let's do this quickly. Let's go through the Wallabies 1 to 15. Assuming everyone's healthy, who's starting where? Who's playing what position? Right, Slipper, Parecki, and I think Alatoa. right? If he's healthy, is starting. What I would prefer to see is if Tupou can get up for it and is fit enough, Slipper, Parecki, Tupou. If Tupou can play 60 minutes, if he's got that in him, he should play for 60 minutes because he gave 60 quality minutes against the Lions. And he did have an extra 15 minutes break, but he'd only been on the field for another 5 minutes after halftime at that point. So I don't, how much that plays in a factor, who could say? Let's say he gives 50 quality minutes. That's great. If we could get 50 quality minutes from Tupou, that's great. If not, then Alatoa. So that one, that's probably a question mark there. Then 4 and 5, Frost and Skelton, right? 6, 7, 8, Valentini, McWright, Wilson, right? No controversies there. 9 and 10, Gordon, Liner. As good as Tate McDermott's been, I think he's been better off the bench. I think he needs to see maybe more game time, though. Maybe cut Jake Gordon's a little bit shorter and so let Jake Gordon put in more effort. So maybe a 50-30 split of minutes because Tate McDermott has been very effective when he's been on the field, right? I'd like to see him get more game time, but I still think Jake Gordon is a very good starter. The rest of the backs, I mean, Jorgensen, Peach, Ikitau. What a game. I didn't even mention Ikitau. What a game from Ikitau as well. Just so physical in that 12 spot. Ikitau, Suoli'i, Tom Wright at 15. Easy, right? Then even on the bench, right? Bell, maybe Pollard or Paenga Amosa. I think Paenga Amosa was really good off the bench, right? I think that backup hooker spot, Pollard, Fezler, or Paenga Amosa, you've got some depth there. You've got some options, right? And then Alatoa or Tupou. You back up lock. As good of a game as Jeremy Williams had, I still think Salako Lotto deserves that position over him. A good 20 minutes doesn't give you a Wallaby spot. Salako Lotto has had 3 good games against the Lions. It looked really good. And I think he'll bring that I think he has that aggression that when Skelton goes off, put Salako Lotto in, he'll keep that same level of aggression and mongrel. Then now here's the real tough decision now. If you're going a 5-3 bench split, do you have Tizano or Hooper on the bench? What do you? It's tough to say, right?
I'd go Hooper. Hooper's versatility and the way he played, I'd go Hooper.
And as unfortunate as it is for Tizano, I think that means he misses out on a spot. I think he means he misses out on a spot. But then he's there for injury cover for any of those back rowers that go down. If Valentini goes down, if McWright goes down, if Hooper goes down, he's there. Even if Wilson goes down, Valentini can shift to 8. I think Tizano is an excellent depth piece, and it's arguably a starter, but he's just got a stacked roster in front of him. And I think Hooper, as you said, has that versatility, and he had a lot of aggression in that game as well. And then your backup halves, Tate McDermott, Ben Donaldson, maybe James O'Connor thrown in the mix, but I think Donaldson's done enough there, and he's going to be hanging around, so you want to keep building him up. And then Andrew Kellaway as your replacement winger, fullback, whatever you need, versatile piece there. And I think that's a very, very good Wallabies 23.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I just think the aggression part is so important now for the Wallabies, like we've seen, as you just mentioned. I think, and it's the Wallaby way, isn't it? And you look at AFL, there's always a little bit of niggle. You love the niggle. Yeah. And it's something that you probably haven't had.
NRL, State of Origin is all about the niggle, right? Like,
yeah.
Yes, 100%. And that's why I've been big ups on Lukan Salakaloto. And a couple of years ago, and I've said this several times on the podcast, a few years ago I was not big on him at all. I didn't think he was that good. I think he's really improved. I think he's always been a good aggressive player, but something ignited him in this British and Irish Lions tour, and he's improved so much over the course of, like, from what we saw in Super Rugby this year to now. Like, even in Super Rugby he was really good. Like, yeah, man, what a player. I really hope he gets a spot in the Rugby Championship and in the tours at the end of the year. Yeah, and I think that's a very competitive Wallabies team, right? To take to South Africa, to verse Argentina, to go to New Zealand, right? That's a very good roster.
Yeah, and as you kind of say, with the niggle, you've got to be able to back it up, and I think that's what Salako Lotu's been able to do. But what would be a good result from the Rugby Championship after coming off a 2-1 series defeat? What would you, as a Wallabies fan, go, look, that was a good result? Would it be, again, winning it would be obviously the greatest result, but like, would you take like a second or a third and you just...
Yeah, I think not coming bottom again. Coming bottom last year was really bad, and, we had some rough results in there, particularly the second Argentina game, where it just it was leading really well and then just falling apart. I don't know what happened with the players there, but it looked like they just ran out of steam after 40 minutes. And a lot more bonus points, less blowout losses if there are any losses. Like, it's less about the standings at the end in this rugby championship. It's less about the standings and it's more about how they look in these games. Like, is this a Wallabies team that we're traveling to South Africa, sure, right? Really hard place to play. Is this a Wallabies team that if I'm watching them in this game, could I make myself believe that if this was played on neutral ground or if this was played in Australia, this Wallabies team could beat the Springboks team? That's what I'm looking for, right? Same in the game against the All Blacks. Win at home, be competitive over in New Zealand. Ideally win. All of these games obviously ideally win. And when we come to predictions of this game, I'm going to say obviously the Wallabies will win, right? But that's what I'm looking for. Is not shooting the bed. Is continuing to take what you've done in this British and Irish Lions tour and translate that across to Rugby Championship, because then that shows that it's not just a one-off blip, that this is a Wallabies team that can sustain that motion and will bring that into all of their future matches. And if they can bring that into all their future matches, now that makes it the task for the 2027 World Cup is much clearer. And it's great that's being played on home soil, because that will give that motivation as well and that sense of expectation. But if you can do it when there's not a World Cup on, it means you'll elevate even more for that World Cup. It means that then what you need to work on is game planning, is technical stuff, and you know that the team is there emotionally and committed and ready to go. So yeah, that's really what I'm looking to see, is to play with that same level of aggressiveness that you've seen in this British and Irish Lions tour, is to take what they did, keep it going. And if they can keep it going, I feel a lot better about the Wallabies compared to where I saw them against Fiji.
And then to finish us off, the British and Irish Lions series is now over. What would you grade, I guess, the Wallabies' performance in Australian rugby as a whole, like the tour as a whole? So I guess break it down into your Wallabies and then the tour specifically with the environment and, again.
Yeah. So the Wallabies, I would give a B+. I can't give them an A because they didn't win the series, right? That's a minimum for getting an A. But B+ is that they should have won the series, right? When we look back on it, we will say the Wallabies should have won this series because of a bad TMO call. They didn't win the series. That obviously means, though, they didn't do enough to secure themselves the series, and they let the Lions get back into that second test, right? Even in the first test, they came out flat, and there were 3 howler calls in that game. But even if those all went the Wallabies' way, there's no guarantee that they would have won that game, right? They were still in a bad position. They didn't come out of the gates prepared enough. I think that's probably the most powerful lesson for them, was that first test, was they didn't come out of the blocks firing. They let the Lions get to a lead. They woke up and realized, okay, this is what something changed for them. They realized this is what we need to do. They woke up and started playing hard and started seeing the results. And that's the best thing for them, was in that motivation. So I give them a B+ because they improved every single game. They played with heart. They played tough. They didn't let normally after game 2 loss like that, the Wallabies would fall apart in game 3. They came back and fought hard, and so for that reason, I give them a B+. For the tour as a whole, I mean, A+, like delivered on the drama, delivered on the spectacle, most watched Lions tour ever, most attended Lions tour ever. The games against the tour matches, I think we had 3 average games and 3 really good games. So Western Force, Reds, and ANZ. Sorry, Western Force. Reds. Yeah, Western Force, Reds, and ANZ. Were average games. Not great. Particularly the ANZ one. I was really disappointed by that. And no offense, really disappointed in the New Zealand players in that game, with few exceptions, right? The New Zealand players looked like it did not matter to them, which, to be fair, it probably didn't, right? They that needed to find some way for them to get motivated. The Waratahs game, the Brumbies game, and the First Nations Pacifica games were fucking crackers, right? For tour matches, right? Where the Waratahs and Brumbies both so competitive with the British and Irish Lions, and same with the First Nations Pacifica, particularly considering the possession was like 60-40 or something like that, and the territory was even more in favor of the Lions. The amount of fight and grit the First Nations Pacifica team showed, as I said, inspired the Wallabies, and that's a lot of players stood out in that match, particularly Tupou, Salakalota, and Paenga Amosa as well, to be honest. So, and then I don't know if you got to see any of the classic Wallabies versus British and Irish legends. Those were some fun games to watch as well. Those are some fun games. Watching Naya Voro absolutely flatten Lee Halfpenny and then give him a little hug afterwards. They both hugged each other. Those are just great games. And the end of the second game came right down to the wire. They were just really fun. They were really fun games to see. It got a lot of people talking about rugby again, which is really, really special. So, and I think, the way the Wallabies fought, this is one of, aside from the Wallabies winning the series 3-0, this was the next best possible result in that. As I said in the last podcast, we got screwed over by the referees who are notably Northern Hemisphere, right? And there's nothing will unite Australians more than fighting the Poms and getting screwed over by the Poms. And speaking of the media and things like that, one thing I have to say that's been very disappointing is I think the British and Irish Lions players themselves have been, apart from some exceptions, have been very good and very gracious. I think Sheehan's speech at the end of post-game interview at the end of the third test was really good and really highlighted the respect the two teams have for each other. Obviously I think Pollock has been a notable dickhead, same with Farrell, but the players as a whole have been good. Even Atoje, who I really didn't like what he did as a captain last week, has still been fairly good overall when speaking to the media about the tour and things like that. But the UK media, and notably the English media more than others, have been really bad, really disrespectful of Australia and the Wallabies from the start. With how much money this tour brings in for their for rugby in England and in the other nations as well, let's be real, they need this money. They need this money as well, because we could see rugby's struggling a little bit in England and Wales. Some teams not being able to play anymore. This is a big revenue boost for them as well. And Australia more than New Zealand and South Africa, right? This is the tour to Australia is the biggest British and Irish Lions tour because of the money it brings in. But then the disrespect from the start of, why are we even touring Australia? It's going to be 3-0 easy. Australia are so bad, blah, blah, blah. And then even once they've won the series, we were never going to win the third game. The lads have been on the piss all week. Just terrible, terrible winners. Terrible, terrible winners. And I said it last week, and I'm doubling down on it this week. Worst rugby fans in the world. England's definitely overtaken South Africa. Definitely. By miles. By miles. By miles. Right? And it's really been from a place of, the last time we played you guys, the Wallabies played England, we beat you in England. Right? You don't have really a leg to stand on in saying Australia is so bad. We beat you. The record as it currently stands is 1-0 Wallabies, right? The only game that matters is the last one, and we beat you, right? So a lot of that chat, I think, is very, very unearned, and I think was a really bad look for the game of rugby, particularly in England, where they're already sort of regarded as an upper-class sport, similar to here in Australia, and they're losing a little bit of momentum. That does no one any good from the game. This tour should have been, from the start, a celebration of rugby and very, very positive. It turned into a mudslinging match, and I think that hurt the Lions' chance of going 3-0 from the start, because it meant Australia was that much more motivated behind it. So that's been really disappointing to see from other rugby podcasts, rugby media in the UK, is how negative they've all been when, to be frank, this tour pays your paychecks, right? This is an essential part of rugby for the home nations, Australia, for rugby as a whole. Seen the spectacle that it's been just take over social media. I think get your heads out of your asses and realize that, you've won one World Cup, so stop chatting shit.
That is true. Well, that'll do us for the British and Irish Lions series as well. Look, and 2-1 to them in the end, but I think we'll be talking about it for the next 12 years, especially the Wallabies fans, until they get another chance. We'll be taking a little bit of break on the podcast, but we'll be back at some point. Mm-hmm. So make sure you stay tuned with all the good stuff on our socials. For now, I've been Luke, that's been Husey. We'll catch you later. Goodbye.
Peace.